I'm Joseph Fosco, sitting next to Lord Black, also known as Conrad Black, and we're here at his home in Bridle Path, Toronto. Hello, Conrad.
Hello, Joe. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. Thank you for giving me a minute of your time. I know
Glad to see you.
You're on your way to meet with
Well, he's actually coming here with one of the party leaders in this province. You know, Canada's divided into provinces rather than states, but their powers are similar.
Sure. Okay, and he's the leader of the
Conservative
yes,
Party.
right. Good. So we'll keep this short. I know you have other things on your plate this afternoon. I just wanted to take a moment to point out what some Americans, in fact, a great deal, a big number of Americans feel about what you were able to accomplish for the United States of America in that dreadful and that horrible experience that you went through a number of years ago regarding issues when you owned the Chicago Sun-Times. First, I just want to go to the part where things finally went right for you, and that's when the United States Supreme Court struck the entire case and vacated all of the charges. I don't want to spend too much time going into details on the miscarriage of justice that took place shortly after that by a lower court, because that doesn't deserve to be dignified. It was so outlandish. But your victory with the United States Supreme Court forever changed the way honest service cases will be prosecuted in the United States. And surely you're clearly aware of that. But I have a number of friends who were very upset about how that law was used to prosecute people in America for many years, who I know are as grateful as I am to you for bringing that case before the United States Supreme Court with such success.
That's kind of you to say, Joe. We started with 17 counts. The prosecution abandoned 4 as completely unsustainable. The jurors rejected 9.
Yes.
So we were left with 4, and the Supreme Court vacated those. Now, your resident Chicago Judge Posner and his panel of silent colleagues resurrected 2 of the 4, because in the eccentric American manner, the Supreme Court, while it excoriated the lower courts, remanded back to them the task of assessing the gravity of their own errors, which enabled them to retrieve the counts if they chose. And Posner's retrieval of 2 of the counts was amongst the most spurious legal reasoning any of my large number of counsel or I have ever seen. And it's not for me to impute motives to people, but we're all unlicensed psychiatrists, and it very much looked like a rather pathetic attempt to attach a fig leaf of plausibility to this completely failed prosecution.
And after you left the United States to come back home, you had a marvelous piece of property in Palm Beach. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. And do you still have that piece of property?
No, I sold that. When I kept it until I was out on bail after the Supreme Court vacation of the counts, and then I concluded that there was a chance, since it was going back to Posner, and I had so little confidence in Posner as a judge, to perform fairly, especially in a case like this where he'd been heavily criticized, that I might end up stuck with a conviction and therefore unwelcome in the U.S. And in those circumstances, I would have trouble selling it, because you'd just be dealing with bottom feeders. So I sold it in the summer of 2010. And it was a lovely house, and I miss it as a house, and I like the community too, and I have a lot of friends there, but it's obviously going to take some time to negotiate a return to that country, and it's a very expensive house to maintain, so I sold it at a good price, and I'd go elsewhere in the winter, into another country.
Now, you mentioned that you have a lot of friends that live in the area. I think Donald Trump is among those friends.
Indeed, and I've been in touch with him.
Yes. What do you think of his current initiative running for the presidency?
Look, he's not a public policy expert, but he is, I think, running, as are Dr. Carson and Mrs. Fiorina, people, none of them been in public office before, running, representing that very powerful section of American opinion that is profoundly unsatisfied with the quality of federal government legislation and executive action over the last 20 years. You know, there were a lot of problems in the latter Clinton administration. You built up the tremendous current account deficit. The entire conventional ground forces military capability of the country was mired in the Middle East for years and years. We had really, in the end, the Iraq War was a disaster, and it's not clear we'll have anything to show for the Afghanistan war other than the very well-deserved death of Osama bin Laden. And look, it's not for me, speaking to American viewers, to dwell upon the shortcomings of the last three administrations, but there have been quite a few of them, and doubling the national debt in 8 years is something that worries people. And the country, since its position in the world has declined, it doesn't like it. It's right not to like it. And there's a natural tendency to gravitate to people who are immune to being accused of being part of the problem. And I think Donald's exploiting very legitimately, very effectively, the impatience with the governing class. So is Dr. Carson in a different way, and so is Mrs. Fiorina. Now, in my opinion, for what it's worth, they're running against the sort of politicians who are not their chief opponents in this contest for the Republican nomination. And people like John Kasich and Jeb Bush and Marco Rubio and even Chris Christie, just to name those, Rand Paul, they weren't the sort of people that mismanaged the country, and certainly as individuals they had nothing to do with it. And those governors had a good record, good track record in their different states, dealing with very difficult situations. New Jersey and Ohio were both in a terrible condition when Christie and Kasich took over the State House.
And your contact with Donald, was it recent?
Yeah, we're in contact from time to time.
Well, you were on his board, or was he on your board?
No, not any board, but we were neighbors in Palm Beach.
Oh, I
and
see.
we jointly developed the old Sun-Times property in Chicago.
Oh, that's right. I remember, I may have to remind you, when you were spending a little time in Chicago back in 2007, you may recall we had dinner with the now late Cardinal George.
Yes.
And you were helping the committee that was in charge of contributions with some advice through me on various charitable, church-related charitable matters. I don't think you were doing it so extensively, but you had other things going on at the time.
My advice is worth what you paid me.
But I do remember that your cell phone rang one time when we were out somewhere having perhaps a meal or coffee or a glass of wine, and I believe it was Donald Trump getting back to you on a matter. Wasn't he supposed to? He was supposed to testify.
Yeah, and then my counsel determined that it wouldn't be appropriate. I didn't particularly agree with them. They knew the fine reason. Well, Donald was happy to come and testify.
Sure.
But he wasn't needed.
I see. Sure. Sorry to bring
And we did win that point. That was on the perhaps the most asinine of all those charges, that
Which one?
An annual corporate dinner, which happened to fall on my wife's birthday, and a birthday that ended in a zero, so it was a particular anniversary. That it was somehow, and because it was in part the theme of my wife's birthday, I paid a third of it myself. Normally the company would pay all of it, but I conscientiously paid a third of it for a dinner that we would have had anyway, even if it had been 2 days before or later. And they claimed that this was using company money to hold the birthday party. They were onto that thing like the man from Kozlovsky at Tycho holding a party in Sardinia or something. It's nonsense. Anyway, Donald came to it and sat next to my wife, and she did her best to sort of move our then active negotiations about co-developing the property in Chicago along. And he was going to say it was certainly a business dinner for me. Very pleasant business dinner, but it was a business dinner.
Yes.
But anyway, we won the count, and we didn't need Donald's testimony.
Right,
He was happy to
right.
come. And it's not as if he had nothing else to do that day.
Wasn't that involving some trip to Bora Bora?
That was another issue, which it was another one of their typically unfounded allegations when it emerged that their own cooperating witness acknowledged that I had treated it in a way that it actually cost me more than it would have if I just hired the plane at arm's length.
Yes. And I think the government tried to, in my opinion, taint the jury a bit by railing off some of the prominent names among your guests. Was it the now late Peter Jennings at that party, or Barbara Walters, and Henry Kissinger?
Henry Kissinger. No, there were a good many prominent people.
Mr. and Mrs. Donald Trump?
Yes.
And, of course, your lovely wife.
Well, they were invited because they're friends of my wife's and mine, not because they're prominent. Some of them weren't prominent. That was the issue. The issue is you invite your friends.
Absolutely, but the government wanted it.
I don't doubt that they tried to do that.
Yes.
It didn't work. It was a credit to the jurors that they weren't impressed with that kind of tainting operation.
Of course. In fact, I also remember they made I think it was your case where they referenced heated towel racks, as if that meant you were living above your means, because you heated towel racks. You could get them for $40 at Walmart.
One, they're not expensive, and two, it was pointed out by my counsel that I paid for them. The company didn't.
Yes.
And not as you say, not that it was a particularly expensive item, but in any case, I paid for it. So what were you talking about it for?
Absolutely. Well, you've had an interesting journey for a couple of years through that process.
Oh, it's all, everything's fine.
Oh, I understand
that. It was a difficult time, but it's fine just now.
It's in the past. You've gone on, and you're doing quite well. Your house is remarkable. It's in a lot of ways like a castle. I hope you don't mind that I'm saying this. You don't have a guillotine out there.
I don't have a moat. But on the other hand, my wife's dogs would repel boarders.
Well, in the interest of your time and busy schedule, I just will close just one more time saying thank you for all the good